Hello and welcome back to Hill and Ponton's YouTube channel. I'm attorney Allison Reddick, and returning is our special guest, Dr. Al Vonetes. How are you doing today, Dr. Vonetes?
I'm doing great, Allison. Thanks for having me again.
Of course, and thank you so much for always coming back and talking with us about these important issues that we want to make sure veterans know about. And today is an important topic. We are going to be discussing mental competency and the VA's determination of what mental competency is and your perspective from being a psychologist of what competency is. So on VA's take, basically what it means is VA is paying a veteran compensation money. They want to make sure that that money is being used appropriately and someone isn't taking advantage of the veteran and taking their money. So when they are involved in C&P examinations, the examiner will ask questions about their competency, whether they're able to handle their funds and such. And from there, a VA rater can determine whether a veteran is competent or not. And so on VA side, incompetency is someone because of an injury or a disease, they lack mental capacity to manage their own affairs, including the disbursement of their funds. So is that similar in your understanding of competency, and what do you look for when you're asked this question on DBQs?
Yeah, that is exactly as I'm seeing it as the definition of what the VA is looking for. Outside of these type of evaluations, people might find court evaluation that competency is, pertaining to the ability to appreciate charges or consult with counsel. In a nursing home, it's about safety and ability to do activities of daily living. And I had a rater explain it to me like this. Competency is the difference between somebody being able to tell what is a quarter versus $100 bill. So that's pretty extreme when we're looking at anything on the lines of a spectrum.
There's no gray area there, but there is, because I get veterans all the time who get proposed incompetency, and it's based off of one C&P examiner who sees them one time and checks a box, doesn't give any explanation of why they deem them incompetent. So in your experience, have you deemed anyone incompetent, and what do you look for when assessing that question?
Yes, I have deemed folks incompetent, and it does happen rarely. It is a very rare thing to have happen, but it does happen. And what I am looking for is, first of all, if somebody is rendered an opinion on this, they shouldn't even know what competency is. To be angry about it means you're aware that it's even happening. Normally, when I get folks that are going down the road of competency, you are escorted by an entourage of people, or at least a wife or a significant other, a family member. Somebody is there with you and going through this with you. If you showed up to the appointment by yourself and you knew how to get there and you drove there and you found the building and the office, and we're talking about competency, no, that's probably not going to get it with the VA.
So besides being able to get to the appointment on their own, let's say a veteran does get there on their own and they're present, what kind of symptoms or signs do you see leading towards that assessment? And is it solely mental incompetency, or can you have physical disorders that can affect your competency as well?
So, that's interesting in terms of when we're talking about total and permanent, when we're talking about disability versus competency. Very rarely will I get somebody who comes to an appointment who is incompetent because of mental health, because of bipolar. Now, they might be impaired, but they are competent. They understand where we are. Usually when the daughter is leaning over like, "Dad, do you know where you live? Mm-hmm. Where do you live, Dad?" And okay, now we're going down the road of competency. But if somebody comes in, and now if we're talking, most folks that come in for these appointments are, even if they have schizophrenia or bipolar, are medicated and they are with other people. If there is a caregiver involved that is keeping track of pills and their daily routines and activities of daily living and getting dressed and things like that, that's more on the lines of competency. I mean, frankly, if somebody shows up on their own and is able to find the building, instantly we're not going down the road of competency anymore. Clearly you know where you're going. if you're able to spot the bathroom on the way in and even understand what this appointment is about, those are things that would really poke holes in an argument for competency. In terms of what the VA considers to be someone to be competent.
And I think that is where the issue lies in what I see, because you are a very reasonable examiner and you take seriously the idea of competency and taking that away, because what we'll talk about later is how being deemed incompetent or proposed incompetent affects your benefits and such. But I guess my issue is that although the veteran is supposed to be given the benefit of the doubt and it's supposed to be clear and convincing evidence that they are proposed incompetent, it seems like the only information that the rater is getting, who ultimately decides this, is that one box saying, can the veteran handle their funds? That one person checked. I mean, I feel like the checks and balances of this aren't great. And I don't think that it should be the rater who makes this determination. I feel like it should get a second opinion or something. I mean, what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And really, there is only one box there at the end talking about the ability to handle finances. I totally agree with that. In all of those cases on the DBQ, the only opportunity a provider really has is in those behavioral observations or in the remarks. In those, I can make it really clear about how the patient arrived, what their mental status was while they were there. Did they answer in just one-word responses? And in the behavioral observations can really break down to whether the person was aware of what the purpose of the evaluation was even about, or, location, time, and all those things that pertain to orientation.
Well, and I think that is where other examiners are lacking, is that they check the box and they don't provide any information. It's not like there's a please explain below it, which I think there should be. It's okay, if the examiner wants to, they can put remarks in, the bottom, but I would tell you 99% of them don't. And so I think the reason why they can get away with this is because it's just proposed. They aren't deemed, because when a veteran is proposed incompetent, they still have their due process rights, which means that they get notice, they get a letter that says, based on an examination of an examiner has proposed incompetency for you. And if you want to fight this, or if you want to submit evidence within the next 60 days or have a hearing, let us know. But once that incompetency is proposed, the veterans' funds can be frozen, because the VA wants to determine whether they're competent or not, because they're worried about those funds being mishandled, which I completely understand. But it seems like a lot of the times that box is checked and there are months and months and months where it can take for this to be resolved, where the veteran is without their benefits or without additional benefits being granted because of this proposed incompetency.
I usually see the other way around, where I'm getting an older veteran that is clearly not capable of handling finances, or really, just completely cognitively offline. And then I'm asking them questions as like, is he, not at 100% total and permanent, or not getting the aid and attendance? Like, he needs the aid and attendance because, I'm looking at the wife and she's aging, and it's like, you can't be, I'm starting to get concerned about her ability to be caring. Because, and I'm looking at all his medications, like, you're the one dispensing all these medications to him, and like, how long are you going to be able to do that? So then I'm starting to think about a much deeper competency that's in the home or for the caregivers. I'd say less, maybe once or twice have I found where somebody was deemed incompetent and given a fiduciary and then upset about it. Because if you're upset about having a fiduciary, or even understand what the word fiduciary means, clearly you are not incompetent. So at least in terms of what we're talking about here, in terms of compensation and pension with the VA. So those right there, these are very much more easier of a thing to poke holes into. It's like, well, if you drove here or knew, how did you get here? You looked at a GPS, so those things definitely help to give us more information. But I rarely hear where the veteran is getting rated incompetent and is not.
And I think that's a good point that you bring up, is that it is important in those situations where it is an elderly veteran with dementia or has severe disabilities where you really are looking out for their best interests, because there may be people out there taking advantage of them and misusing their funds, which is why the VA puts this in place. But I see the other side where I'm getting the veterans that are like, why are they deeming me incompetent? Like, I know how to manage my money. I see the opposite side, but as you state, it is something you can poke holes in. So once a veteran is proposed competency, you can they can ask for a hearing and they can submit evidence, and so you can fight it. If you don't fight it and you say, okay, I'll be deemed incompetent, that's fine. What the VA does is they pick a fiduciary to handle their affairs. They'll appoint one. If it is a situation where a fiduciary is needed, we try to get it to be the wife or a family member. But in situations, this can something that can take months and months, and it can take a long time.
Allison, I really want to piggyback off that and give an example. I did have one case where it was a husband and wife that came in, and he was, I want to say, a Korean War veteran, maybe in his like late 80s. And she answered most of the questions. I asked him, he jumped in once in a while, but she handled all the finances. The reason I point this case out is because I did render him incompetent. And then I get the same case again, months later, where he's appealing that. And that the wife is the fiduciary. And he was upset with me. So he comes in and, as we're even walking back to the office, he's like, last time you said I was incompetent. And I was like, well, we'll take a look at that. So I get into the report and then I read everything that I wrote. And I was like, well, where's your wife this time? And he says, well, I wanted to speak on my own behalf. And I was like, well, last time you didn't speak on your behalf at all. In fact, she answered everything. And I have everything that she said, that he couldn't even get out of bed if it wasn't for me. He wouldn't be able to cook his own meals. I just went through everything. He's like, well, that's true. And I was like, but now you're telling me, and she handles the money. And he's like, well, we do it together. And I was like, well, what does doing it together look like? One person is clicking that button to pay the bills, and then he was like, well, and then he started to see that she really was doing everything. And I was like, listen, the fact that you are aware that this even happened means that if something happened to her, you could get by, you could do it. So I told him, I was like, I am going to change this, and I am going to clearly explain why things are different now this time to why you could. But I told him, I was like, it's really close. I was like, this is a really borderline one. But I was like, the fact that you came back and explained it, we'll change it.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that is very important for veterans to understand, that when they do go into an exam like that and they're not saying anything and their significant other is saying, I handle everything, or though they tell them, yeah, my wife handles the finances. Okay, well, you need to clarify whether, yes, I can do them, but she handles it because I'd rather her handle it and she's more organized, versus you mentally cannot do it. Because I think that is exactly where a lot of these proposed incompetencies are coming from, is that the veteran says, oh, my wife handles all the money, I don't do anything, or she does everything for me. And it's like, well, you can be physically unable to do your activities of daily living and need help, but still be mentally competent to pay your bills if need be.
You're right.
That is a very, very important distinction that you make.
And I will say, could you do it? Could you do it? Like,
exactly.
if it was, pay the bills or nothing, and if they still say, like, I don't know, like, I might be able to, but it would be, here's another one. I might be able to, but it would be really bad. I might miss a bunch. I might pay the same 1, 2, or 3 times.
Then you're incompetent.
Yeah.
You're probably.
But again, that's still pretty good awareness.
Yeah.
You even aware that you would be doing that. So, I mean, those are very borderline cases. And I got to tell you, in those cases are where the testing would really tease it apart. And that's what this is really missing, is on those borderline cases, a real assessment, and not the mocha, like, this is a rhinoceros, a little bit more than that.
And I think that's the most important distinction, is that if there's question in it, the examiner has an obligation to make sure that those funds aren't being misused, and it's proposed. So the veteran still can provide evidence that they are competent, but it's really important important that the veteran is conscious of what they say to the examiner if they are mentally competent, because those little things that they say about the wife, or I don't know how to do that, it's too complicated, that is a possibility for getting proposed incompetency. And so when a vet is proposed incompetent and they call me, well, if you even know what that is, like you said, then you're most likely competent. And how to fight that would be to ask for a hearing or get your doctor or someone to submit a statement saying that you are competent. Now we'll get into some common questions that we get about this, because some people are like, you know what, I don't really want to fight this, whatever, they can do it. But there are negatives of not being deemed competent, which number one, big one that we get asked about all the time is, if I'm deemed mentally incompetent, will the VA take away my gun? And so legally, yes, they can. They can prohibit you from purchasing, possessing, receiving, transporting firearms. Have veterans asked you about this, or what's your understanding of that?
I have had veterans ask me about that, usually because of post-traumatic stress, not because of the competency. Like I say, usually when I'm getting cases down the road of competency, they're not even really aware what a firearm is. It's really rare where it's on the fence or somebody doesn't know. I can only give you maybe one or two examples of that. But I have had people ask me about the firearms, and I feel like they can do really anything that they wanted to if they felt that you were a threat to yourself or others. I have not personally heard anyone say that they had their firearms revoked because of competency. No, I have not. But I'm not saying, like you say, I mean, they absolutely could. I mean, they could, and they could technically take away your benefits if they feel like you're not being treatment compliant, and that could be part of it.
Yeah, I think that's what the regulation states, is that it prohibits you from purchasing and having them, but are they going to go out to your home and take away all the guns? Probably not.
No problem.
But that's not information I would be flaunting around. And if you are deemed incompetent and you actually are incompetent, you shouldn't have firearms. So that is another reason to fight the proposed competency, if you feel that you are competent, because legally you are prohibited from owning and possessing a firearm based on that finding. Another question that we get is, it's so hard for, veterans to go to these C&P exams over and over and over again. And I have so many vets that are like, I don't want to go. I'm in pain all the time, and I don't feel comfortable explaining the extent of my symptoms because I'm afraid that I'm going to get Baker acted or be labeled mentally incompetent. Do you have experience with veterans being cautious about the extent of their symptoms because of those fears?
Yes, for sure. And then again, that's where, and we talked to this about suicide too, that's where the rapport comes in. And they have to know that you're asking as a matter of fact kind of thing, not in terms to hold it against them. Like, my job here is to gather the information, whatever that is. And I do let them know that, what real threats that would warrant that kind of action would look like, at least from me. I mean, for me to go down the road of involuntary hospitalization, you really do have to be serious about your next moves and your intentions. And it can't be like, oh, well, once they understand that, I do feel like, okay, it's a little bit of a looser situation to be able to talk about this stuff in an open forum without feeling, that they're going to be kicking in the door and the white coats are coming in. I hear those are some of the things I hear. So, it is about trying to make the veteran, or really whoever you're dealing with or talking to, is comfortable about being able to go down the road of talking those things. But absolutely, I do get a lot of veterans that complete trepidation about how deep they want to go explaining how bad it really gets.
And I think overall, this whole process is to protect the veteran and to make sure that people aren't taking advantage of them. Now, are they proposing people that I don't think are incompetent? Absolutely. But that's also why you have the process of being able to fight it. And since you stated that the veteran that you had deemed incompetent came back and fought it, that's another possibility too, that if you're deemed incompetent and you miss that window to fight it before it goes into effect, you can file a new claim and get your competency restored if the evidence shows that, if it is something that was made in error.
Let me just also say this, because after that one particular case, I make it really clear, competency, a lot of people don't know. I make it really clear, like, just so you understand, she's getting the money.
Yes.
When this gets dispersed, she's getting the money. Like, do you understand that? And then like a lot of them will be like, cool, totally cool. I mean, I've never had anybody really object to that once they understand what I'm actually saying. They're like, nope, she can do, I trust her with it, So I do feel like, yes, you got to make it clear in layman's terms about what is actually happening here.
Absolutely. And there are many situations where I think the wife or the spouse should be the fiduciary. Just on a legal perspective, I just want to make sure that that is the proper, it procedurally is done properly and due process is followed. But yeah, absolutely. There are many who the wife should be the fiduciary. The vets are fine with it and everything's okay.
I don't want them leaving with like a misunderstanding.
Yes. She handles the money. It's your benefits, but it goes to her, and then pay your bills with it and do with it as you will. If you're okay with that, that's what's happening.
That's it. Then you're right.
So do you have any final comments or tips on mental competency for veterans?
That being honest and forthcoming is the best way to go. And it's okay to have a significant other handle your benefits or even handle the finances, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're incompetent. If you are rendered incompetent, it does mean that you will be assigned a fiduciary. It's good to know what that's really entails.
Absolutely. And I think we covered everything about incompetency and proposed competency and your perspective as the examiner and the process you go through and the legal side of it. So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for doing another video with us. I'm sure we will do some more. And thanks to all those who have watched thus far. And if you found this video helpful, let us know in the comments and make sure you leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Dr. Vonetes, where can veterans find you?
So great. Thanks again. You can find me at Voncare and Doc V for Vets. Those are the two places. So great to do these. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if anyone has suggestions on topics that we haven't covered that they would like to be covered, just let us know in the comments and we'll try to get those covered as well. Thank you so much, and everyone have a great day.